Welcome to the Veritas Forum, engaging university students and faculty in discussions about life's hardest questions and the relevance of Jesus Christ to all of life.
It's good to see a great turnout here tonight. How many people here have done some research or thinking already about human trafficking or slavery, modern day slavery? Okay, and for any of you, is it part of your curriculum, part of the courses that you're taking? One or two or three or four. Okay, great. You're welcome to ask any questions you want. As I'm speaking, feel free to put your hand up, and I'll repeat the question so people can hear it if you're not very loud. But also at the end of the evening, I think there's going to be question and answer as well. So no question is too insignificant, because a lot of people know very, very little about modern day slavery, human trafficking, or the kinds of violent abuse that IJM, International Justice Mission, looks into. Sometimes when you're talking about justice, everything can be very theoretical. And the first thing I want to do tonight is say from the outset that there's nothing really theoretical about justice when it involves human beings. Like this little cutie here. Justice is all about what happens when big people abuse little people, when wealthy people take advantage of poor people, when men take advantage of women, adults, abuse children, and so on. It's a very, very real and important issue because it only exists in reality in the lives of human beings, and it always involves somebody being hurt. IJM, or injustice, is about whole families, moms and dads and kids, but it affects children and women the most. 80% of the clients in IJM are female, either as children from 4 years of age and up, or as women, adult women with families involved. And because people will tend to get theoretical about justice, it becomes a big topic of conversation in academic circles and in classrooms and with politicians. But whenever you hear somebody talking about justice and injustice, remind yourself that it's really about this little girl here. It's about real, live human beings. That there are people in the world for whom their life is utterly miserable. Justice isn't distributed equally around the world. And the predominant burden of injustice falls upon the poor. Right from the beginning, my thesis is that freedom can't exist without justice. So if you're going to talk about human freedom, you can't talk about it in a vacuum. There has to be an examination of justice and injustice in place. Without justice, just about every form of human rights is made impossible. And without justice, international development has no sustainability. Okay? I lived for 5 years in Africa, and I saw lots of development projects in the works, and some have been completed. And some of them were effective and lasted long after the project ended, but some of them didn't. And in almost every case, those that failed on an issue of justice, an issue of criminality. Somebody took advantage of the project and that shut it down immediately, and there was no way of redressing the problem. So human rights, freedom, and development cannot happen and cannot be sustained without justice. In Canada, we call it rule of law. And that's our problem as North Americans in understanding injustice. There's a saying, you shouldn't ask a fish about water, because he has no idea what water is. It's all around him. He's never known life without water. And so he can't comment on water one way or another until he doesn't have it. It's the same with justice. And in North America, we are surrounded by the justice system that attempts to make sure your life is just. Just as an example, this building. You can sit in this building tonight and not be afraid of it falling down on top of you because of the rule of law. There are laws about how this building had to be built, how it has to be looked after and sustained. If you came here in a car or a bus or some other vehicle, there's a multitude of laws about how that vehicle has to be put together and what it should be able to withstand while you're in it, right? So every day your life is surrounded by aspects of justice or the rule of law. The roads that are built, the way food is packaged, the way people are able to sell you things, all of these are dependent upon law. And so sometimes as North Americans, born and raised here, if you were, then you might not really understand what injustice is all about. Because as far as you know, nothing unjust has ever happened to you, except if you were like me. I had a couple sisters, and of course when we were little we used to fight, and they could hit me and get away with it. Totally unjust. But when I would hit them back, my mom and dad would clamp down on me so hard it was almost child abuse. Okay, that's as close as I ever came to injustice. So when you're thinking about it, you have to keep comparing, okay, what do I know about injustice and how do I feel this? And it shouldn't be too hard, particularly for the women in the room, to begin to get an idea of what injustice is like on the global level. Because, as I said, our clients are primarily female, and almost every single form of violent abuse involves the rape of women. It may be a secondary part of the injustice done to them, as in the case of slavery for labor or for the building of products. But sooner or later, forced sex, rape, will be a part of the equation too. And so for particularly the women in the room, it should be an ongoing part of your life in the days to come where you become fully aware of the effects of injustice on your own gender and how it's a lot easier for you to think about that than for a man to really feel it. There's a number of groups in the world that try to do something about injustice and talk about it. So the United Nations has all kinds of programs about justice and trying to encourage the rule of law in the world. In their own report, though, they'll tell you that 4 billion people live in places without access to a real justice system. Where they live, the justice system doesn't work. One of our basic commitments in IJM is to help impoverished people be able to take advantage of the justice system that exists around them. And this includes things like abuse of police, entrenched bribery, mismanaged courts. I was in India last year, and I went to the High Court in Calcutta. And compared to a court in Canada, it's a very different scene. It almost seems like chaos. There is an order to the chaos, but it's quite different than what we're used to here. The number of cases before the court is in the millions. And so it takes a long, long time. And that's true in many parts of the world. It could take, well, we're still dealing with cases in IJM in one place that are 7 years old, that have been in the system, that have had multiple meetings before a judge, but they're not concluded. They're 7 years old. In the meantime, in that 7 years, we've had 4 different judges, and there's been a constant shift in the prosecuting, or the defending attorneys and the prosecuting attorney that we work with. And so when you shift people around all the time, when a different person is involved, it's very, very hard to have a cohesive form of justice. How many people here have ever been, well, maybe I can't ask that question. How many people have ever visited a courtroom for any reason whatsoever in Canada? Okay, how many people have never been inside a courtroom here? Right. Well, a courtroom in Canada is actually quite an orderly place. There's a judge, there are people who help him, and it's very, very quiet. Everybody waits and speaks whenever they're spoken to. But when I went to the High Court in Calcutta, it's the High Court for 17.5 million people. And in the building itself, on any given day, there's 7,000 to 10,000 people. And people go in and out of the courtrooms all the time because there is no systematic schedule of the cases for the day. The only thing that's electronic is the night before, an email is sent out to the people who will be presenting a case the next day that they are on the list for the next day, and that they may or may not get to their case, but they're on. So every lawyer has to have an assistant who does nothing else but wait at the High Court for the case to get close to the surface. And when it gets within 2 or 3 cases, then they phone to the law office and the lawyer comes over to present his case. Otherwise, he would have to sit there all day when he could be doing other things. So that's just a simple example there. Nothing electronic other than that. Whereas here in Canada, everything is electronic. And if your case is scheduled for a certain day, it might get postponed, but it will be postponed for a reason. We recently won a case, a slavery case, and we were able to, it was in Rwanda, Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, and we were able to try a case even though the prosecutor didn't come. It was a rape case, and we had our lawyers there who worked with the prosecutor. The defendant showed up, and his lawyer, but the prosecutor didn't come. No one knew why, no one knew where he was, but there's a loophole in the law that says if there are civil damages involved, in other words, if the person is going to be sued, if they're found guilty, then the case can be presented by an ordinary lawyer. So the IJM lawyer brought this up to the judge, and the judge allowed him to prosecute the case. Because of that, the case was finished that day. There was a conviction, there was a sentence, and there was a fine as well. So how things work in each country is different, and it can be a little chaotic compared to what we're used to here. Another group called Transparency International, studying how people look at their own legal system, found out that 79% of people in Cameroon and 72% of Cambodians had paid a bribe to obtain basic services in the previous year. There are 2 kinds of bribery. One to get what you deserve, and one to make sure you don't get what you deserve, all right? So this kind of bribery is the one you pay to get what you deserve. If you're going to get your driver's license here in Hamilton, you go and you pay a fee and you get your picture taken and so on. There's a system, and it's exactly the same for every person. It would be absolutely shocking if the person who is going to be your driver examiner asked you for $50 while you were out on the road. If he said, you know, you made 5 mistakes, but I won't record any of them if you give me, you know, Tim Hortons coupons, which is real Canadian money, you'd be absolutely shocked. You might think it's a good deal, depending on how good a driver you are. But that's not the case in other places. When I lived in Zambia, one time I was walking down the street and a policeman called me over. He was guarding a bank. And he said, you know, you shouldn't be walking in front of the bank. I could arrest you right now and take you to prison. I said, oh, I'm terribly sorry. And what he really wanted was for me to give him some money to get out of it. But I just pled ignorance and apologized to him and asked him, you know, all about his life, and eventually he let me go. But it took about half an hour. He was basically asking me for a bribe just for freedom, just to be free to walk down the sidewalk. Another friend of mine was riding a brand new bike that he just got. He was a pastor, and he was given this bike, and a policeman stopped him and he said, I saw what you did. And he said, well, what did I do? Well, you broke that law. Well, what law did I break? And he said, look, if you give me some money, I'll let it go. And he said, I'm not going to give you any money. I didn't break any law. And the policeman reached down and he pulled the stems out of both tires, okay? The valve stems. So ruining the tubes that were in the bike. And there's nobody, you know, offering to pay him back for those ruined tires. Right? So bribery, just to have normal life and to get what is normally should be yours, is a very common thing. So when you hear about bribery, it's not always, the person paying the bribe is not always perverting justice. Sometimes it's the only way they can get justice. Another think tank called Afrobarometer found that 53% of people in sub-Saharan Africa didn't believe that a senior government official would go to jail for a crime. Okay? More than half of the people felt that if he committed a crime, he would get away with it no matter what, just by right of position, just because of the power that person would have. But that's not the rule of law, is it? That's the rule of a person. In Canada, we would expect that a person, no matter what their position, if they broke the law, will be held accountable for that law. In the United States, there's a guy, Edwards, I forget his first name. He was running for the president of the United States in the last election. Does anybody remember his name? Jonathan Edwards? No. There was a guy who, he was found to be having an affair with a member of staff.
John Edwards.
And she got pregnant and she has had a baby. Well, his wife had cancer.
John Edwards.
Anyway. So, the crime that he's been accused of is diverting campaign money to pay for his mistress. Right? And he's about to go to trial on that in the next few months. Now, being a very crafty politician, he married the woman, so now she can't testify against him. Very sneaky, isn't it? Wife doesn't have to testify against the husband. But we fully expect that something like that should be prosecuted and that he would be held accountable for it. Even though he's a very high-ranking person, very famous person, wealthy person, none of that matters in a country where the rule of law is more important than the rule of a person. The World Bank, in finding out about what people's attitudes were toward the police, in Kenya, 64% of people felt that most or all of the police were corrupt. And in 23 countries, poor people saw the police not as a source of health and security, but of harm and of risk and of impoverishment. Now, when I was growing up, which was, maybe 5 or 6 years before you guys, my mom always told us that if we were ever in trouble or ever got lost, just go find a policeman, and he would help. Right? That has been a normal paradigm in the West for quite a while. But then when I went to Africa, that was not the case. When I said, where does someone go when they need help? Do they go to the police? The answer was no. Don't go to the police. That's not your best source of help. Okay, so it's a very, very different world for some people than it is for people in North America. India has 11 judges for every 1 million people. There are 20 million legal cases pending. 70% of all detainees in an Indian prison have never been convicted of a crime. In fact, many of them have never been charged with a crime. So they're held there, they're kept there, real live individuals like you, like the person sitting beside you, or like your little brother at home. Okay? Kept in prison indefinitely, awaiting a trial which may never happen because they may never even be recorded as having committed a crime, but you can't get them out very easily. Martin Luther King said that freedom is never voluntarily given. It must always be demanded by the victim, by the oppressed, or, as I put at the bottom, by somebody who's going to act on their behalf. So in a world of injustice, it's real live people, and the solution to it is other real live people. Sooner or later, a human body has to come alongside somebody else who's suffering to make the difference in their life, to bring skill to bear, to bring pressure and power to bear on behalf of a victim. It's never going to come voluntarily. It's like the bully in your school when you're growing up. He never voluntarily left you alone. He only finally left you alone when you turned around and punched him in the nose, or got some bigger guys to beat him up, or reported him to the principal, or something. Right? Bullies never stop bullying until somebody makes them stop. And in International Justice Mission, that's what we do. We're a Christian human rights agency, and we focus on casework, legal casework, against people who are suffering from some form of violent abuse. We don't do tax fraud, okay? We don't investigate Ponzi schemes or traffic accidents or anything like that. What we're involved with is primarily some form of violent abuse of an individual person, and we do casework. We work alongside with local authorities, and we work on cases just like you would see on TV on your favorite program, like The Mentalist or Castle or Law and Order. Every one of those shows is about casework. A crime is committed, people investigate it, it's brought to court, and it's tried. We go a little bit further in IJM in that we do those things. We do undercover investigation, we bring the case to the police, we help them arrest the perpetrators and free victims. Then we help the victims to readjust to life in normal society, and that can take many years for an individual. And we, in the end, hope that we're going to change the whole system, change a whole segment of society to stop that kind of problem in that place forever. Here's a little video. They look very young. In IJM, we have rescued girls as young as 4 years old from brothels. These are 4-year-olds who are providing sex for men. Okay, they're not just feeding them or something. They actually are used for sex, and it all starts out with some form of deceit, where they're told they're going to a certain place, they're going to do certain things, and earn money, when in fact it's all about forced prostitution. So it starts when they're very young. Same with slavery. A family that has been enslaved, their children will begin to be part of the whole organization when they're about 4 years of age. As soon as they can begin to do some minor part of the work where the people are being held. But injustice is all about power being misused, okay? And it's misused in lots of ways. It's misused to steal, to exploit, to starve, to degrade, to force, to injure, to neglect, okay? If you ever wondered if there's evil in the world, there's lots of evil in the world. And the more you learn about the need for justice around the world, you're going to learn about forms of injustice that you never would have thought of in your entire life. So injustice is all about power being misused. In our case, in IJM, the kinds of things that we take on are very, very few, right? Slavery, forced prostitution, violence against widows and orphans, abuse and murder of street kids, rape, citizenship for persecuted minorities, and illegal imprisonment. In a number of countries, in 4 countries, we primarily work to help widows who have lost all of their property when their husband died. In those cases, it's called property grabbing, and it happens at the funeral. All the family comes to the funeral, and when they leave, everyone takes things with them, including the door frames of the house, the window frames. If there's anything movable, will be taken. And often the widow is actually kicked out of the house itself, and the house and land or any business is taken over by relatives. And she has nothing. And it used to be that she would be all alone, but now, in the age of AIDS, with so many grandmas and grandpas caring for orphans, she's left with the orphans. It used to be that any orphans would be absorbed by the extended family, but now they're not. They're still left with the grandma. So grandma might be left with 6 or 8 children and absolutely nothing to clothe them, feed them, and no means of making a living. So it's a very, very brutal practice, and we take those to court, case by case. Persecuted minorities who don't have citizenship. If you didn't have citizenship, imagine all the things you'd be missing. And in case you don't know, in Canada, if you don't have citizenship of some country, that it doesn't have to be Canadian, you can be here legally from another country, you won't have access to education of any kind, medical care, the ability to own property, certainly can't vote. And the only good thing is you won't have to pay taxes. because you won't have anything to pay taxes on. While there are millions of people in the world who, for one reason or another, have no citizenship in any country. And in northern Thailand, we work with a group of hill tribes there who don't have citizenship. And about 1,000 people a year are able to obtain citizenship. And once they do, it transforms their entire life. They can't even move down the roads because there are police roadblocks every few kilometers, and they have to show identification, of which they have none. So it leaves them wide open to being raped, to being kidnapped and enslaved, to be used for labor. And it leaves them just wide open to violence of every kind, because everybody knows nothing will happen to you if you hurt this person, because they're a non-person. They don't belong to anybody. So a lack of citizenship is a very brutal way to go through life. Slavery happens in the world today in numbers that are staggering. It ranges, when you're reading various reports, it'll range anywhere from 14 million to 34 million people held in slavery. The number that's most often quoted is 27 million. That would be today, on any given day. In the North Atlantic slave trade, over a period of 400 years, about 12 million Africans were exported from Africa to the West in 400 years. And so today there's probably about exactly twice as many right now at this moment in slavery today. It's just taken on different forms, different dress, but it's as evil a practice as it was then. The only difference is slaves are a lot cheaper now. The investment in a slave from Africa was the equivalent in today's money of about $40,000. Right? That's why when slaves ran away, they would get chased down and brought back, because they were considered property that had a very high value. Well, now a slave has a value of less than $100 per person. So in the case of girls who are held in brothels, if they run away, they'll be chased down and they'll be brought back and beaten in front of the other girls. And it's a very common thing for them to be beaten to death in front of the other girls. It's a great incentive for them to not try running away. It's the same in people who are held in slavery in a factory. They may try to run away, but they'll be brought back, and the same kind of thing happens, because it's very easy to replace them. The cost is less than $100 a person. Now, every girl in this room can remember when they were this size. These girls are 10 years of age or so. What were you doing when you were that age? You probably weren't being held in a brothel having sex with adult men multiple times a day. But it's the normal case, increasingly for young girls around the world. And they can be bought and sold. They're little, so it's very hard for them to resist any form of coercion. And they can be bought and sold at will. So that's the environment that we work in. These girls, in IJM's case, when we raid a brothel, what we've learned is that they end up in a brothel because somebody came to their village who was a distant relative of someone else in the village. And after being there for a few days, they said, look, why don't you send your daughters with us to the city? Because we will give them a job in our tea shop. They can earn a bit of money and they can go to school. And they can send money back to you. And so the parents are very happy, the little girl's very happy because she wasn't going to school in the village. She gets put on a train, she's taken to an entirely different city, so that even if the parents come to find her, they won't be able to find her. And she's sold within hours of getting off the train to a brothel. So it all begins with that kind of a story. Now, in order to engage in this work, you have to have some kind of internal motivation. In the case of Christian people, there's a lot of injunction in the Bible telling us that it's our duty. And this is just one of them, and this is actually from the Old Testament. It says, stop doing wrong, learn to do right, and seek justice. Defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, and plead the case of the widow. The reason why I put this here is because whatever background you're coming from, if you want to engage in work with people who are suffering violent forms of injustice, you have to be very highly internally motivated. It's not really a high-paying career, okay? It's not really glamorous, and you put your life at risk in doing it. In every country where we work, we have undercover investigators, and every day they go out to do their work, they put their lives on the line. Because if they're caught, most likely they'll be killed right there on the spot. Because they're interfering with some very strong and powerful people, how they earn an income. And so their identity, if it gets exposed, is going to cost them their life. So if you're thinking of doing this kind of work, which I hope you are, because the world doesn't have too many people looking after the poor, just remember what's motivating you. What is it that's going to keep you strong in the difficult days? There are only two things that need to exist for this kind of violent injustice to happen. And the first one is lying. Okay, there has to be a lie. It all begins with somebody telling a lie to somebody else. And the second thing is violence that keeps the person there. Once a little girl's in a brothel, of course, she's threatened that if she tries to leave, she'll be beaten. Another thing she's threatened with is, if we can't find you, we know where your parents are, and we'll go there and we'll kill them. And by that time, she may have already seen someone killed right in front of her. It's the same in the case of slavery. Slaves are beaten almost every day. Women are raped at will. And they may be a married woman with her husband right there, side by side, working with them. So it's a very, very difficult life. But they are also kept by threat of violence. One person was telling us when we were visiting that in one case, the owner of a brickyard was telling the slaves, had them all gathered and said, "You are mine, I own you, you belong to me, you have no life apart from me. And if you try to run away, we will kill you. And just to show you that I'm serious about this, this is my wife." And then he took out a gun and he shot her, right there in front of all of them. So the example being, if I'm willing to shoot my wife, then don't think I'm not willing to kill you. So violence and the threat of violence. Those two things, it's all it takes, lying and violence. And there's plenty of it to go around. So how do you fight it? You fight lies with the truth. And in order to get at the truth, you have to have an ability to investigate and find out what the truth is. In our case, we have undercover operatives who will go and investigate and do video and take depositions from slaves in the middle of the night. All kinds of ways we have of getting at the truth and recording it and getting it down on paper. And we gather that together until there's enough to take to local authorities in order for them to come and raid that place. Enough proof that injustice is happening that it satisfies the police. And so that's the number one thing in order to get at the truth. And with violence, you have to fight violence with power. You have to somehow put protective power right between the victim and the perpetrator. All right? This has to do with the rule of law. In every country where we work, we appeal to the laws which are already on the books. They're just not being enforced for lots of reasons. In the case of my daughter, I have a couple photos of my daughter here in a minute. She's working in India, and she's working on a slavery project. Well, they got a conviction against slave owners on a law that was written in 1880. It's 130 years old. And no one could remember the last time anyone had been convicted of the habitual dealing in slaves. But a year ago, they had that conviction. And it was the first conviction in that city against slavery, and within a month we had a total of 9 convictions in 1 month, all cases that had been pending over time. But that was bringing the protective power of the law to bear. But it also means you have to, sooner or later, somebody has to put their body there. So when a raid takes place, our whole office will go on that raid along with the police. Where my daughter works, there's about 40 people in the office. Everybody goes except for the 6 men who are undercover. They are never seen again. They've already gathered the evidence ahead of time, and they're never seen as part of that program again because they have to keep their identity hidden. But the rest of the office goes on the raid, and their number one job is to get between the slaves and the managers, the ones who are beating them, the owner, and so on, and help shield them, in a sense, and herd them out while the police are dealing with the owners. That means putting your body right there in the middle. And that's where it really comes down to one human being helping another human being. The United Nations and a lot of NGOs, they fight for laws to be enacted at a very high level, at the level of bilateral, trilateral, multilateral agreements between countries. And those are very, very important. But no law actually helps a person until somebody, a human being, puts themselves on the line to enforce it. Okay? It should be the police, but sometimes it takes just an individual person to put their life, their body in between. There has to be somebody. So this fighting of injustice around the world can't be left at the higher levels of treaties and laws. Those are very good and they're very important. But it has to get right down eventually to the lives of individual people. So that's why we fight injustice one case at a time. One case, then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It has to get right down to the bottom. We have 4 objectives. First one is victim relief. Second one, perpetrator accountability. In other words, prosecuting those who were committing the crime. If you don't, they just start up again. Because like I said, it's $100 to get another slave. They may run away, but they'll be back. They'll try every possible means, even if they're convicted, to not go to jail. But we are more and more are getting convictions of people who need to be held accountable. And this is important because all they want to do is make money. Okay? They're just in it for money. It's an exploitation issue. And if they're in jail, they can't make money. And their neighbor, brothel owner, begins to see that maybe he needs to get rid of all the underage girls he's holding because someday he's not going to be able to make money either because he'll be in prison. The United Nations definition of human trafficking, I put it on here just for your enjoyment. It begins with the recruitment, transportation, transfer, housing of a person. So it's like a kidnapping. Okay? Human trafficking is somehow the obtaining of a human body and taking control of the person. Then, by means of threat or force, or both, they're kept, and then they are sold. And the reason is exploitation. It's a $32 billion a year industry. Okay? Illegal drug sales is the #1 crime industry in the world, and now illegal arms sales and the trafficking of human beings to make money are tied for second. But does what we do make a difference? And can you make a difference? Well, this is what you're up against. You're up against bars that are both real and psychological. You're up against steel that keeps people locked in. And somebody has to break those locks along the way in order to get people out. But it makes a big difference for these slaves. This is on the day these people were released from slavery. The process is that they are then taken before a magistrate. They tell their story, and if the magistrate agrees that they're telling the truth, they will sign a paper saying they can no longer be held as a slave. That's the law in India. Unfortunately, no one had ever created the form. And so in IGM, we were able to create a form. So when we go and do a raid on a factory, we take along computers, printers, laminators, cameras, and we put the whole thing together right in the magistrate's office. So it's signed, sealed, and delivered literally that day. And so now the form that we use is available to anyone in India who's fighting slavery. It's the official government form. But what it means for these people is that they can go anywhere to live in India, and they will be able to get access to health care, to education for their children, and they will get money from the government to help them resettle. That's my oldest daughter, Sharon. She'll be 25 in February, and she works in investigations in India, but she has a hard time hiding. She's 5'10" and very Caucasian. So she wasn't able to do any of the undercover work, but she works with the undercover operatives in her office, and she collates all of the evidence that is brought in. We work on multiple cases at a time, and each one has various types of evidence, and in different forms and in multiple languages, from photographs to audio recording, video recording, statements, thumbprints, because people can't read and write, and all of that has to be not only stored, but then easily accessed in order to build the case. And then they regularly, weekly, sit down and look at all the evidence they have on a particular case and decide what more evidence do they need, and the undercover guys go in again and try to get more. And when the case is finally all put together, then it can be taken to the authorities. Those three girls, 2 years ago, Sharon was there doing an internship after her first degree, and the very first raid she went on, she helped rescue these three little girls. So in September, this past September, these little girls, along with their parents, were at a graduation training program on leadership. At the end of the rehabilitation of people who've been held in slavery, it's a 2-year program. They are given a 3-day leadership training seminar to teach them how to lead their communities. Anyway, these three girls got there and they saw her and they ran over and tackled her because they ended up spending 3 days in the magistrate's office because he wouldn't sign the forms. And so they slept in the hallway and she played games with the kids all night long. This little girl with Sharon was rescued in the same operation, and her goal now is to become a lawyer. She's going to go from slave to lawyer. And her goal then is to help other people who are being held in slavery. But we know she can do it because we just had our first law school graduate in India. 7 or 8 years ago, as a teenager, he was rescued, and he went from illiterate slave to law school graduate in the last 7 or 8 years. His brother is earning a degree in commerce. Everybody has hopes and dreams, and especially parents who have hopes and dreams for their kids. This man and his wife and the biggest boy at the bottom, they were all slaves in a rice mill. And they were rescued a couple of years ago, and since then they've had 2 more children. And he now has his own business. So he's actually a business owner, and he's a leader in his community. These 3 ladies, a little bit older than the rest, have spent their whole lives as slaves. The one on the far right is a little bit younger, and she is a community leader. She, in her community of 600 or 700 people, has shown all kinds of people who've never been slaves how to get what they need and to get better schooling for their kids and so on. The lady on the far left, though, here, she's the oldest one, and her children are not alive, but her grandchildren were slaves with her. And since she got out, I wondered, what does she do for a living? So I asked her that question, and so here was her answer. She said, I got three forms of income from the government. They have 3 programs, and I got all 3 programs. I took that money, I bought some cows, and I bought some goats. So when I get up in the morning, I take my cows and my goats to where they can graze, and then I go off to my day job. And then when I'm done my job during the day, she has a paying job. She says, I come back and I get my animals, I milk them, and I sell the milk. Okay? And I said, well, that seems like a lot of work. Aren't you exhausted at the end of the day? She just laughed. She said, no, this work is like flowing water. compared to being a slave. It's very easy. So she went from being an illiterate slave to figuring out how to get 3 sources of income from the government, get a job, and sell milk. She has 5 sources of income. And I think she'll be a very hot commodity soon. Some guy is going to ask her to marry him. A woman with income. These ladies just got their citizenship in northern Thailand. And their comment was to get citizenship is like going from darkness to light. It's like being dead and then you're alive. And this little girl, who's the same age as the girls you saw earlier, she will never be a slave. Because in her community, people now know what slavery is all about. And her parents are aware of how they can be tricked and how she could easily be taken from them. So what about you? What can you do about these things? Well, the first thing is, what are you studying? How can it be applied? How can your life, you got a whole life ahead of you. You might as well do something that's very, very impactful and difficult. It leads you to a much richer life. So how can it be applied to the work of injustice in the world? I don't know exactly for all of you. There are all kinds of different career paths that will lead you to a justice application. In our organization, of course, we have lawyers, we have investigators, we have social workers, we have counselors, we have administrators and accountants, IT people. So there is a wide variety. If you want to know, if you want to read an article about it, just give me your email before you go, and I'll send you an article about careers that lead to justice initiatives. Okay? That's one thing. Think about what you're doing with your life. Another thing is, think about what you're doing with your voice. Will you tell anybody tomorrow what you learned today about these things? Will you explain it to your parents? Will you explain it to a friend or a sister? And will you even bother to learn any more about it? Because there's lots more to learn. There's a lot to be learned about just what happens here in Ontario, which is often hidden. But once you begin to look into it, it's quite prevalent. And the last thing is, what do you do with your money besides buy pizza and Tim Hortons coffee and tea? We have a program, it's just called a Freedom Partner, and it's at $24 a month. It's to remind you that 24 hours a day, people are being held in slavery. And that even 1 hour is too long to be held in slavery. We had the privilege of rescuing a girl from a brothel. She had been sold to the brothel one day, and we rescued her the next day, before she'd ever seen a client in the brothel. Tremendously exciting to get somebody out that quick. Okay? No one deserves even 1 hour in a brothel. So consider becoming a Freedom Partner. But you can learn more about IJM from our website. And we weren't able to figure out if anybody can click on those and actually get those to work. So if you can, let me know. But we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on the internet at ijm.ca. Our American office is ijm.org, and you can come back regularly. We have constant updates on our website, new news articles all the time about what cases have been resolved and what happened. But there's also a card on your table. I left a little white card there. If you want to get regular email updates, you can fill out that card. Once a month we send out a newsletter by email, approximately once a month. I think it's 11 times a year. And if you're a praying person, we send out an email every week. And it's a confidential prayer bulletin which talks about the cases we're working on. Of course, we can't give you people's real names, but it enables you to see what we're working on and to pray for that. So that's a little bit about justice and injustice in the world today. Whenever it comes up, make sure the conversation you're having with somebody, that sooner or later you talk about real people. Don't let it stay up in the stratosphere of ideas for too long. Make sure you bring it right down to real live people, because that's where it is really felt. Well, that's it from me. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have question and answers now or in a few minutes.
Well, my name's Chris Kovac. I worked with the Navigators of Canada for almost 10 years on the campus here. And I moved on to a church up on the mountain called West Highland Baptist Church. And as horrible as physical slavery and the lack of freedom is, there's another side to this whole story. And that is what I would call spiritual freedom or spiritual slavery. Now, whether or not you're free depends a lot on how you define freedom. In our culture, a lot of people define freedom, the concept is kind of autonomy. Autonomy, the Latin auto nomos, so self-law or self-governance, so that we're free from, we're free to make decisions, we're free to move around physically, we're free to do things. And that's a correct understanding of one type of freedom or slavery. But not everybody has defined slavery like that through the decades and the millennia. For instance, Greek thought slavery, in the sense of moral freedom, was the ability to do what's right. That's a different kind of freedom or slavery. If you don't have the ability to do what's morally right, then you're not free. You'd be a moral slave. And the Bible, I'm going to walk you through what the biblical kind of understanding of this is. This here is one verse of the Bible. It comes from Romans 6:23. Romans was a letter written to the Roman church, kind of explaining doctrine and how to live your life and that sort of thing. So this is one verse that I think basically summarizes the entire message of the Bible. So have you ever had the Bible explained to you in about 15 minutes? Kind of the whole message of the Bible? No, good. Okay. No. Well, maybe that's not good. I'm not sure, but we're going to do it right now, okay? So the verse says, "For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus." So when you think of the biblical worldview, it says that we're not free. And it really talks about the world existing in two different economies. So I'm going to use a metaphor tonight to kind of explain it. And the first economy is on the left-hand side. The second economy is on the right-hand side. And the first economy, I'm going to imagine for a second that economy, the big employer, is called Sin Incorporated. Now, Sin Incorporated is a huge conglomerate, lots of employees. There are some benefits in terms of pleasure and serving yourself, that sort of thing. It's got kind of a guaranteed retirement plan. You work for this company your whole life. It's got a lot of employees. And it pays out a wage. Now, a wage is something that you deserve. Okay, imagine if you worked for your summer job or whatever, and at the end of the week, your boss said, "Well, sorry, I'm not going to pay you." How would that make you feel? Well, you've been treated unjustly, right? Because you've earned that, you deserve that. And so the Bible says that we are working for something, and we're going to deserve what we get. We'll be just. And that something is sin. Now, something that Scott said that was interesting, he said, if you want to know about water, don't ask a fish. Because they're surrounded by it, they just got to get used to it. Well, the same is true of sin, right? If you want to know about sin, don't ask a person necessarily, because we're surrounded by it all the time. We grow kind of immune to it, and I can show you that really easily. Just think of all the things. I worked in a high school once, a Christian high school, and we would talk about sin. And what I would do is I'd break the class into groups. I'd give them a piece of paper, and I'd send them out onto the school property, and I'd say to them, write down everything that would not be here if it weren't for sin. And they'd go out in their groups, and there was a prize, so that, there was a little bit of competitiveness going on here. And they'd go out, and they'd come back with reams of things. Locks. You ever think about locks? Locks are there to protect your stuff from other people taking it and stealing it, right? We just take it for granted that we get used to locks. But a lock is a a glowing red light saying sin is alive and well, right? Sin is really putting ourselves first, being the captain of our own ship. Self-centeredness would be another way, a word that you could separate, use to define sin. You know, they came back with things like eyeglasses. You know, sin has impacted our bodies. We die because of sin. So they would come back with these reams, these sheets of all kinds of things in the school that wouldn't exist, signs that say do not do this and do not do that, because sin was there. Another way you could define sin, in the Old English language, it was an archery term, and it meant to miss the mark. So if you pulled back and you shot, you're always aiming for the bullseye, right? So morally speaking, we're aiming for perfection. And so when we sin, we miss perfection. We miss the center of the bullseye. Now, some people are further away from the center than others, right? Hitler was pretty, you know, he didn't even come close to hitting the target. You know, some people are closer than that, and some people closer still, but nobody hits moral perfection. We've all fallen short of that standard that God has set, that God requires, because He Himself is perfect. So we're working for this company called Sin Incorporated. We're earning wages, and those wages at the end of the day, if you're working for that company, you're going to get a paycheck, a big fat paycheck that says pay to the order of, insert your name there, and it's going to say the sum of death. Now, death, in the Greek language, in the Bible, that was the language of the Bible, the word was thanatos. And that meant the separation of one thing from another. So from a physical standpoint, death was the separation of the soul from the body. From a moral perspective, there's a spiritual death too. The Bible talks about two deaths. There's a physical death where your soul is going to be separated from your body because of sin. It's not because we, evolved and our cells stopped multiplying. Or if it was that, then it's sin that set that in motion. But there's going to be a second death where your soul will be separated from God. Now some people will say, well, that's not fair. There was a speaker the other night that said, this is completely just. Because death, which is really, the spiritual death is hell, people are getting exactly what they wanted in life. Right? They say all their life, I don't want God, I don't want God, I don't want God, I don't want God. And at the end of their life, when they die, they get exactly what they wanted. Except, this speaker said, and I thought this was profound, it's not what you expect. It's not a bunch of guys sitting around playing cards and drinking beer, right, and laughing. Billy Joel kind of talks about he'd rather laugh with the sinners than die or cry with the saints. It won't be like that. It'll be the absence of everything good, everything that's about God, patience, kindness, joy, love, peace. It'll be a place of regret and misery and remorse, and you wish you could change it, but it's too late because it goes on eternally. So that's the one side. The wages of sin is death. That's what the Bible says. We are enslaved to sin. And if you want to prove that to yourself, go home tonight or tomorrow and try to follow the 10 Commandments. See if you can do it for a day. Don't covet. Don't lust. You'll find out pretty quick that you can't do it. I know I broke it lots of times today, just in my, being angry or coveting stuff or whatever. Happens all day long. But, now that's a great word, eh? But, that means that's not the end of the story. And so here comes the second half of the verse. The other economy is the kingdom of God. And God, and you see how these are all juxtaposed. Wages, gifts, sin, God, death, eternal life. God offers us a gift. A gift is something completely different than a wage. It's free, it's undeserved, and it comes from God. And the gift is eternal life. Now, eternal life isn't something that happens on the other side of death. Eternal life is something that starts here and carries on past death, right? I've already inherited eternal life. I will die physically, but I will never die spiritually. I will never be separated from God. I'll be with Him from the time that I became part of His family, forever. And so it's a free gift that God gives. Now, what is that free gift? Well, you see in the middle, this is kind of, there's a chasm with the cross in the middle, joining them. Well, that cross, if you take the cross out, it's a big kind of bottomless pit, kind of symbolizing what separation from God will be like. And what we often try to do is we try to build little bridges over to the other side, right? So we do good deeds, we give money to charity, walk the little ladies across the street, go to church or other religious kind of endeavors. The problem is that goal that we said, God demands moral perfection. And so in our culture, it's not about a scale. This is what all the other religions of the world teach. At the end of your life, they teach there's going to be a scale, and if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, then you get into heaven. No. If you think that and you step into eternity and you come before God, He's going to say, no, my standard is 100%. Moral perfection. I won't allow anything less. And it has to be that way. When my wife and I both went to school here, she was a biologist, and she used to go into labs, and she had to put like a cap on, she had to put a lab coat on, she had to sterilize her hands, because if she went in there and contaminated the lab, it would wreck everything. Right? Well, sin is the same way. We need to be cleansed from that sin. We need to be made right, so that, because if we went into heaven in the state that we're in now, we'd do exactly to heaven what we've done to this planet. We'd destroy it. We'd have to have locks on doors, we'd have to have police, we'd have to have hospitals, we'd have to have, all this governance to enforce things, because we do the same thing, because we're selfish beings by nature. We're enslaved to our own passions and lusts and desires. We want what we want. We want to be the captain of our own ship, and God says we can't have that. So He offers us an amazing plan. I want to read you a quick little illustration to kind of help you understand. This was 2007, January 2nd, 2007, a guy named Wesley Autry. Have you heard of him? Wesley Autry was standing in a New York subway, and I'll read you the little blurb that it says. A young man stumbles from a subway platform and falls onto the train tracks, dazed and disoriented. As horrified bystanders look on, lights flicker in the dark tunnel, signaling that a train is rapidly barreling closer. In a split second, on the afternoon of January 2nd, 2007, construction worker turned national hero Wesley Autry motioned to a woman nearby to watch his two daughters, 4 and 6. Well, he leaped onto the tracks to shield the man who was 19 years old, who was in medical distress, having suffered an epileptic seizure moments before his fall. So this guy jumps onto the tracks, and there's a 21-inch gap between the tracks and the floor. And he looks over, nods to the lady. His little girls knew exactly what their daddy was about to do. He jumps onto the tracks and lays on top of the guy and presses him down as hard as he can, and the train comes right over top of both of them. This is really what the gospel is. This is the good news of what Jesus has done for you. The train of God's judgment for sin is barreling down the tracks straight at you, and Jesus looks over to his Father and gives him the nod and jumps down on top of you and presses down to rescue you from the wrath of God that is coming when Jesus returns. What we deserve is the train, the full force of the train. Jesus, the difference here is that Mr. Autry didn't die, right? But Jesus comes down from heaven, he climbs up onto the cross, and like a giant spiritual sponge, absorbs the sin, the punishment for your sin upon himself. He takes it all upon himself because he loves you, and he wants you to be made right and put back into right relationship with him and with his Father. So what the Bible uses one word to describe what your response can be or needs to be, and it's repent. That sounds like an archaic, old kind of religious word, right? Repent. But repent just means to do a U-turn. A U-turn in the way you think, right? Maybe this is something new to you, and you've never heard this before. But repent means that you change your way of thinking. You agree with the way things really are, not with the way things have, the lies that you've been told or whatever. That you are a sinner who's working for this sin incorporated and who deserves to die, not just physically but spiritually. And that God, through his Son, gives a gift of eternal life, that Jesus has paid the price, that there is no other way back to God. There's no Buddha or Muhammad or any other religious figure. They're all in their graves, right? Jesus rose from the dead to prove that he is victorious over sin and has the power to forgive. You go and check any other tomb, they're all there. Jesus is the only one who is risen from dead, victorious over sin and death, and offers now for you to respond to him. So repent means to do a U-turn, a change of thinking, but also a change of behavior, right? You basically surrender your life. You give up autonomy, and you say, Jesus, I want you to be the one, the captain of my ship, the one who drives my car, the one who is in control of my life. I surrender my rights to you. And the beauty of that is that that's what you were created for. And that's where we find our most fulfillment. We don't find fulfillment in running our own show, because we weren't created to. We find our fulfillment in giving our lives over to God through Jesus Christ. And we find wholeness and completeness and love and joy and peace and all the other good things that God has to offer us. So I want to say, you have a little response card there. These have been handed out, haven't they? Yeah, this white one. If this is something that you've heard for the first time and you feel like God is kind of tugging on your heart saying, I want you to respond to this, and you want to, or maybe you've heard it lots of times and this is the first time that you feel like you want to respond. You want to respond to the invitation to have your sins forgiven, to be given eternal life, and to enter into a relationship with God for the rest of eternity. Then on the back here, I want you to just indicate that. Okay? Someone will follow up with you personally. They'll call you within the next couple of days, meet up with you for coffee. If you're a girl, it'll be a girl. If you're a guy, it'll be a guy. So they'll follow up with you for coffee or a cup of tea or something, and you can just share with them kind of how you're processing that, how you're tracking and that sort of thing. So just write on there, I've made a decision to follow Jesus tonight. Please connect with me. Here's a way to get in touch with me. Easy enough? Easy peasy.
Thanks. First question, I guess I'm going to pass you the mic. First question is, what is the value of human trafficking on a global scale, and how does this compare to the value of other high-trade commodities like oil or electronic goods?
Well, the value is about $32 billion, but I don't know how that compares with other things. I know that pet food, which is not exactly a global commodity, but it's somewhere in the $3 billion range, I think. What was the other one? What we spend on Halloween in North America is somewhere close to $1 billion. So, but those higher commodities, I don't really know.
Second question is, how do you respond to the moral implications of the undercover investigators, more specifically with regards to telling the truth in all situations?
Right. Well, they're never asked to tell the truth, for one thing, because so far they haven't been discovered. But it is, of course, a very important question. I've had people say to me, including my own father, we have a number of books in IJ, and one of them is called Terrify No More, and it's a story step by step of how a case works, and it's in Cambodia. So my dad only read halfway, and then he said, I can't read any more of that book. He said, it's too graphic, and he said, why don't you just get some people together and go over there and shoot those guys? Okay, well, if you think you got a problem whether or not you're going to tell somebody who you are when you're undercover, shooting somebody is probably not the Jesus way. If it's WWJD, what would Jesus do? So until I come across a group called Assassins for Jesus, I won't be able to sign up with those people. As far as how the individual investigators view their work and what they're doing, they not only have the difficulty of doing that, but even when they are with people they know, the only one who knows their real identity is their wife. All of them have a cover story of some kind. They're usually businessmen, because only businessmen have the sort of free time, or unemployed people, and money. A businessman has money, and so they can go to brothels in the middle of the day. So they have to work through all of that, and they have to come to an understanding in their own mind about what the moral implications of those things are. But for the most part, amongst Christian people, to find the ability to get at the truth about something is of a very high order. And if by wearing a disguise, that's how you find it, that's not considered to be as problematic. But you'd have to really sit down and talk with an investigator to find out how exactly they work that out.
Hi. I was just wondering, what is the typical jail sentence for somebody who has a crew of slaves, or they're running a brothel, and they get convicted in a country like India?
The sentences are severe. 5 years to life, just depending on what country you're in. And that's the irony of the thing. If you can actually get it prosecuted and get the person convicted, the sentences are very heavy sentences, especially compared to Canada. You know, here in Canada, you could commit murder and get an 8-year jail sentence and be out after 3 or 4. Okay, I have a relative of my own who his stepbrother killed 3 people, including the other brother, with a shotgun, just here in Ontario. Spent less than 8 years in jail for killing 3 people. So the sentences are quite severe. We had a man last year who was convicted of slavery, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but he was 75 years old, and he lasted 1 year. He died in prison. Prisons in other parts of the world are not nice. They don't do, like in Canada, I think we spend somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 to keep one person in prison. It's not like that in the rest of the world. If they spend $100 to keep the guy in prison in terms of food and so on, that would be generous. So the sentences are severe. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. We've had women convicted of trafficking, and they'll get 15, 20, 30 years.
I've had a couple of questions basically asking, how would you go about working with corrupt police? If people are so wealthy, can they not just buy their way out by bribery? If bribery is so prevalent, how do you work along with that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because of course we face corruption at every level. People are really hard on police around the world, but police in other countries are often badly trained. They get very little training, and their pay is very low. And it's very hard for them to think of defending a slave when someone is going to pay them literally half a year's wages to not do it, when no one else cares if you defend a slave, right? There's only, very few people who care. So it's very easy for them to take the easy way out. So what happens is we will gather the evidence, a date will be set for the raid, people will marshal, like our office people, and the police will all arrive in one place for a little briefing session, and then they'll go to do the raid. Well, often, and probably at least half the time, somebody who's in that little group phones ahead and warns the owner that we're coming. So we have somebody on site in front of the place that's getting raided, and they will phone back to our people and tell them that the owner has just taken all the slaves away in a truck. The first raid that my daughter went on involved a car chase for 2 hours, where they chased the truck all around the countryside, and as the guy tried to run away with the slaves. And eventually he was coming up to a road, and there was a police roadblock ahead, so he stopped and he let them all out. And that police roadblock wouldn't have known anything that was going on, but he was afraid. Then all the slaves out on the side of the road, and about 5 minutes later a bus came along, and so one of our people took all the slaves on the bus and was able to get away. There's no buses go on that road. It's not a bus route, but a bus came along anyway that was empty and took them all to safety. So we face that kind of corruption all the time. What was the second part of the question? You don't remember? Where's the lady who asked that? Yeah, what was the second part?
If the traffickers are so wealthy, then what is the benefit of paying the way?
They've been paying their way out of sentences forever and out of even getting caught. I'll give you an example of not just wealth, but in the Philippines, there was a case where a man was convicted of rape. He was sentenced to jail, but nobody would arrest him because his uncle was a police officer. So just that little bit of influence. So he walked around town all day long while the girl who he had raped saw him free. So that's another form of the same thing. So you have to get a little tricky, or you have to find some way, and it gets a little humorous. In the one case where this guy then took off, and when we would go to the police, they say, well, we don't know where he is. So 2 guys from IJM went to his mother's house, and the one guy stayed in the car taking pictures. He was an American, happened to be there. And the other guy was a local person with IJM. He got a coat and a cap from the local grocery store. And he went and knocked on the door, and he asked for this guy, and the mother said, oh, he doesn't live here, he lives far away. And, oh, that's too bad, because he entered a contest at the grocery store, and he won a CD. And it's a CD of the Eagles. Now, do any of you know who the Eagles are? It's like an ancient band. It's old like me. Okay? Anyway, so she said, well, give it to me, and I'll give it to him the next time I see him. He said, oh, I can't, I would lose my job, that's too bad. And she said, well, wait here. So she went in the house, she came back, she'd drawn a perfect map of where the guy lived, and gave it to him. So the 2 of them went to the other side of town, and did the exact same thing. One stayed in the car taking pictures, the other guy knocked on the door. The guy came to the door, he asked him who he was, and he said, you've won this CD, and they filmed it, right? So then they went back to the police and said, we know exactly where he is. They showed him the film, took the police there, and the police arrested him, and he went to jail. Okay, so, but there's as many ways to get out of going to jail as there are people who get arrested. So it's an ongoing issue. They try to use every bit of influence and money to not go.
Here, I'll ask you a question first. A lot of people asking, what is slavery kind of stuff look like in Canada? Do you do any work in Canada and the States? And then thirdly, to go along with that, what kind of degrees did your daughter graduate with? How does that all work?
Sharon graduated with a degree in criminal justice and a minor in strategic intelligence analysis. And so we hate it when she's home because she just sits there and analyzes us all and seldom finds intelligence. Then after she did her internship in India, she came back and she went to Durham College in Oshawa, and she took a 1-year program in advanced law enforcement and investigations. When she comes home this time, she's most of the way through the process of joining the RCMP, and her plan is to join the RCMP, become an officer, and eventually become an investigator, and eventually then use that in order to get a position overseas fighting human trafficking. Human trafficking in Canada is primarily the purview of the RCMP. They have a center, an office in Ottawa for human trafficking in Canada. And it's also part of the immigration and passport control people who are in Bowmanville. So last year when she was going to school in Oshawa, she was able to do a work term in the office in Bowmanville with those people who are directly involved in it. The other question was, what does it look like in Canada? What it looks like here, if you go to the RCMP website and look up human trafficking, it's right there. There's a whole list of what it looks like. But here's how you could end up being seduced into forced prostitution, okay? If you're in a mall, here's how they do it. They'll find a girl in a mall and they'll follow her, and eventually a guy will go up to her and will tell her, "You have really nice hair. Have you ever thought of being a model? Have you ever thought of being a model?" Oh. And we'll engage her in a conversation. Now, if the girl says, "Oh no, I don't look good," if she's really sort of self-conscious and lacking in self-esteem, they pursue her. Because they know that eventually they can tell her enough nice things that they'll win her trust. Okay? And so eventually she will meet with the person again. And this person, by the way, is dressed in a suit, looks like a business person, and usually says, "You know, I have a business partner, and we do a lot of photography of models. We would shoot a package with you." And then if she agrees, then they go and they shoot a package with her and that kind of thing. And over time, they win her trust. The guy becomes her boyfriend, has her move in with him, and then after a few months, comes home with a customer. That's the process. And if you don't think it's real, I was telling that exact scenario in a school in Burlington. And I should introduce Heather. Heather over here was an IJM intern in our office in London. And Heather and I were speaking at a school in Burlington, and two girls came to talk to us afterwards. That exact thing had happened to the one girl in a shopping center in Burlington. Guy came up to her. She noticed this guy. Every time she came to a store, she could tell that this guy was sort of stalking her. Anyway, he came up, told her she had really nice hair, just like that. But she was able to avoid it. And I said, well, imagine if that happened to a girl who was really struggling because her parents were separated and she's living on somebody's couch for the week, and the next week will be in a different place. Well, we found out afterwards, that girl, her parents had separated, she was living on the other girl's couch. But she still had resisted the advance. So anyway, that's how they will get a hold of you here. That's one of the processes for getting a North American girl involved in forced prostitution. Other forms of it are the importing of women from Eastern Europe and even from Asia, and by people who do it as an organized people smuggling type of business.
Sorry, just to follow up on that. I know that you said like you're looking for red flags all the time, especially with smuggling of people. How would you look for red flags in North America in organizations to bring attention to that, like to call light to it to government figures and such? Like how would you see it's happening?
Last week I had a pastor call me from Sarnia, and he had, Sarnia has Lambton College, okay? And at Lambton College, there's lots of international students. There's 5 girls from India living in an apartment together. They were brought here, he found out, by a person in Canada who was Indian. And he had just called them the day before and said, "I have to collect more money from you because the school wants more money. But don't you give it to the school, I'll collect it and I'll pay it on your behalf." He had charged them $8,000 each just to come to Canada and for him to get them into the school. And now he was going to get more money from them besides the tuition they had already paid. That wasn't a pure human smuggling case, but it is a case of severe abuse of the immigration system in Canada. They were here illegally, but he was continuing to squeeze money out of them under false pretenses. Where you will see other signs of it is people who are working in some establishment, they speak not a word of English. Okay? Now lots of people come to Canada and don't speak any English, and they make their way. But in some cases, it's intentional so that they can't find out from local people about certain true things. There was a case here in Hamilton just about 2 years ago now where people from Hungary were working in Canada in construction. They had been brought to Canada by one family here. When they got here, their passports were taken away, and as they worked, their pay was taken from them by the people who brought them here. One of those workers eventually figured out how to ask somebody about it, so they did, and found out that this was wrong, and the police were called, but by the time they got to the house where all these 11 people were being held, the family who was holding them had run away. And I haven't heard yet that they have been caught. So it was a Hungarian family in Canada, imported more Hungarian people to work virtually as slaves, and had controlled them by removing their passports and telling them they're illegal here and keeping all the money. So that, if you read the RCMP website, that's one of the characteristics. People from one ethnic group are brought here by people already living in Canada of that ethnic group. It's a very common scenario. I don't know if that answers it very well, but that's just a couple examples.
All right, thank you for all your questions. I'd like to thank everyone that came for coming. I'm glad that you're making yourself aware of what's going on. I'd like to thank Scott. Just thank him again. Thank you.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.